Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Gwen Gringheis, and I'm the Assistant Registrar, International and Recruitment for the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design. And I'm so pleased that you have decided to join us today, and we hope that we will be able to answer any of the questions that you might have. We will start off with a brief presentation followed by a Q&A, and we are hopeful that you will be able to enjoy tonight's presentation. I do want to take a moment to pause and reflect and acknowledge the lands upon where the University of Toronto does operate. And so for thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And I do recognize that we're all not necessarily in the same place, so I would encourage you to pause and reflect on the lands where you might be located at this point in time. So I will go over some brief information for you, some of your next steps before we move into a panel discussion. And we're very lucky today to be joined by some current students as well as both of our program directors. And so you will have an opportunity to learn quite a bit this evening about our program as well as the student experience. In this photo, you can see the City of Toronto, which is the backdrop to the Daniels faculty. And in this building, you can also see three of our buildings that we have. So they're in the center of the circle is our building at 1 Spadina. And across the road, we also have the Borden buildings, which we call North and South Borden buildings, where we have some courses and labs that are offered as well. At a very high level, the University of Toronto is made up of three campuses. And so we do have the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, University of Toronto Mississauga campus, and then our University of Toronto St. George campus, which is located downtown Toronto, and which is also where the Daniels faculty is located as well. And so the U of T St. George, which is the downtown campus, is located against that backdrop of the downtown city skyline. And of course, like you saw in the previous photos, this is where the Daniels faculty is. And so if you're familiar with Toronto at all, Spadina is the street that basically goes in a circle around that main Daniels building. And then, of course, beside the Borden buildings as well. So this building here is our building at 1 Spadina Crescent, and this is a recently renovated building, which is home to many of the different lab spaces, the registrar's office and student services, some professor offices, as well as a place to get some coffee and hang out with some colleagues. You definitely will have classes in this building. And then across the road, we have our North and South Borden buildings, where students have lab spaces, classes, and professor offices as well. In the Daniels faculty, we do have two undergraduate programs, architectural studies as well as visual studies. I will go into a little bit more detail, but I won't go into a lot of detail on these programs, and definitely feel free to ask questions of our experts who are here on the Zoom webinar today. And so for the first year courses in architectural studies, there are a number of required courses, and you can see that they're indicated here and broken down by the fall term and the winter term. Students have a little bit of choice in that they can choose one elective courses in their first year, which allows students to explore maybe a different subject area if they so desire. A question we do receive a lot is, what does the schedule look like? Now, I do need to emphasize this is a sample schedule and it can change slightly from year to year, but just to give you an idea of what your schedule might look like in your fall term versus your winter term. And you will see that you might not necessarily have classes every single day, every part of the day. And so it doesn't encourage students to make the best use of their time outside of the classes to make sure that they're getting their schoolwork done. Our visual studies program, you will see some similarities in that there are some three required courses, and there is a little bit more flexibility in this program to pursue other academic interests. And so in the first year of the program, students do have two courses or two credits that they can choose other academic disciplines. So if they are interested in pursuing some different areas, they definitely have the flexibility to do so. And again, a sample schedule, what that might look like, just to give you an idea of where the courses might be plotted out in a weekly schedule. We often do use different language, and so just wanting to be sure that you understand what we're talking about if we use some of these words. So a specialist is one that we might reference, as well as major and minor. And that just simply refers to the number of credits in a particular topic or to particular area of study that students are studying in. And so if our students might reference these, our professors might reference this, this is what we're referring to when we talk about these words. And so just, I guess, at a glance, if you're taking a look at our undergraduate programs, there are some similarities and there definitely are some differences between them. The degrees themselves, both of our programs are honors Bachelor of Arts degrees. The Architectural Studies program is a specialist program, and there are some areas where students can choose after their first year of the program. And all students will start in the same kind of stream of the program, and the majority of their studio space is located in that building at 1 Spadina Crescent. Our visual studies program has a little bit more flexibility in terms of specialist or major, as well as adding those other academic disciplines that we talked a little bit about. And they have a lot of studio space available in the Borden buildings, which is directly across the road. In thinking ahead and in planning ahead for your future, there's a few things you might want to think about. Some of that might be thinking about living in residence, which would be on campus. You might choose to live off campus, or perhaps you're thinking about commuting from home or from another place located nearby. And so there's a few things to think about. If you are thinking about living in residence, you have some deadlines to be aware of. For all of these different options, you have to make a budget and think about some of the costs that might be involved in that. If you are planning to commute, you might want to look into the various modes of transportation and the best way to get to where you would need to be for the majority of your classes. For those of you who might be thinking about living in residence, pay attention to the deadlines as there is an application deadline of March 31. And of course, you have to maintain your eligibility. And so that's responding to your offer of admission by the deadline in your offer letter, etc. You're always welcome to visit the housing website for more details about any of these options. Tuition is something to think about as well. So if you're an Ontario resident, your fees are indicated there. If you are a student who is outside of Ontario, so Canadian, but maybe living in a different province, your fees are slightly higher in terms of tuition. For all three, the ancillary fees do not change. The international student fees are quite a bit higher, as well as one other thing to consider if you are coming as an international student is there is something called UHIP, which is the University Healthcare Plan, which you do have to pay for as well. And so in budgeting for school, you definitely want to think about tuition costs, but there's a few other things to keep in mind as well. If you were thinking about buying a computer, there is information on the Daniels website about recommended computers, as well as information about the different softwares that are available for students to download. Some are through the University of Toronto, some are through Daniels. And another thing to think about would be some of the studios and supplies and printing. Now, these costs can vary quite a bit from student to student, as well as the choices that students make, but it is important to include this in your budget when you are planning for school. Scholarships award and financial aid. A lot of this information is available online, but just to keep in mind, if you are in the province of Ontario, to take a look into OSAP. If you are out of province, into your own provincial loans. And something to note for our American students is that the University of Toronto is able to administer the US loans, which can be helpful for some of our students. Orientation is something that we probably will talk a lot about to you because of how important it is for getting you set up for success. There are two parts to orientation. So there is an academic orientation, which is completed virtually and provides students with all the information they need in regards to their academics. But there's also a social orientation, which is in person, and the photo in the background there shows you a little bit about what that might look like, but it gives students an opportunity to get to know some of their peers and to make friends and to learn a little bit more about the campus as well. So to summarize next steps, the first step, of course, is to accept your offer of admission, and you can do that through the Ontario University Application Centre. If you are planning to apply for residence, you have a deadline there. Taking some time to understand your courses, reading through the information online about enrollment and elective courses, assessing your finances, thinking about your budget and what that might look like. And definitely attend orientation. Final tips, if you are so interested, come to campus, take a tour of the St. George campus. You're always welcome to schedule a building tour of the John H. Daniels buildings as well. And definitely keep those grades up and keep working hard. So that is it for me. I know that you probably want to hear from our current students and our professors, and so I will stop talking and I will invite all of our panelists to join and share a little bit about themselves. So maybe we will start with our two program directors. And so if we can start with Gareth, if you could just introduce yourself and share a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Gwendolyn. So as mentioned, I'm Gareth Long. I'm the program director for the Visual Studies program. I'm a professor here, and I've been here since 2016 or 2017. Also, interestingly, I actually did my undergrad in Visual Studies in this program a long time ago. But I feel like it does give me a bit of a perspective here as having been on both sides of the equation. So if any of you are thinking about visual studies, I'm happy to answer any questions specifically towards that.
Thank you. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Gwen, and thank you, Gareth. My name is Peter Seeley. I'm assistant professor. I'm an architectural historian. I've been teaching at the Daniels faculty since 2016. And for the last 2 years, I've had the pleasure of serving as our program director for architectural studies. I've had the honor of teaching the three wonderful students who are going to join us. And I'm really looking forward to answering the questions that you might have about our specific program. But I also want to say one of the biggest strengths of the Daniels faculty is exactly the fact that we have visual studies and architectural studies. We also have students in different master's programs, PhD programs, but it means that in this little part of Toronto that Gwen showed us, these buildings around Spadina Crescent, you've got really fantastic people doing all sorts of different things. And it just makes for an amazing education if you're an undergraduate in visual studies or architectural studies.
Thank you, Peter. So we'll just go based on who I can see first, and we'll start with Prasham. If you could just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your experience.
For sure. Thank you. My name is Prasham. I'm in my fourth year of architectural studies, and I'm minoring in visual studies as well. And I'm currently doing my thesis in the fourth year of undergrad, and it's kind of marrying craft and technology.
Thank you. And Olivia?
So, hi, my name is Olivia. I'm also a fourth year undergraduate in the Bachelor's of Architectural Studies. I'm currently doing my thesis in design, specifically in memory and architecture and how those two things kind of like intersect. So, yeah.
Thank you. And how about you, Maru?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Mahru. I am also in my fourth year of architecture studies. I'm also minoring in visual studies. I'm doing a capstone project for my fourth year on urban design and architecture mixed. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And so to our audience, if you have any question for any of our panelists, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A button. If you click on that Q&A button, you can enter your questions there, and we are happy to answer them live. So we did have a number of questions that were submitted in advance as well. So we will start with some of those questions. And some of them, I think, are directed specifically towards our program directors. And so we'll start with that one. So the first question is, how is the studio component structured into the first year of the program? And I'll ask Peter first and then Gareth to talk a little bit about what that might look like.
That's a great question, especially because I'm sure most of you in high school have perhaps already had a history course, or you might already have had a course teaching you about computer software, but Design Studio might be something new. So in your first year in architectural studies, you'll have 2 studio courses. In the fall, we have ARC 100, ARC 100, which is about introducing you to the City of Toronto, and it's about introducing you to some of the drawings that architects make. So every student, and your professors kind of help you choose, will choose what we call a third space, which is a cafe, or it's a store, or it's a restaurant, the kind of spaces that make a city. And you'll go there, you'll study it, you'll observe how people use the space, you'll start sketching and making drawings and maybe even take some measurements. And then every week in studio, you'll be working on the different kinds of drawings that architects make, the plans that show how different spaces are arranged, and all kinds of ways of showing buildings in 3 dimensions. We'll also teach you some computer software to make these. But you're really learning about the city, and this might be, you might have lived in Toronto for your whole life, or this might be your first time in Toronto. And either way, it's great to have all our students studying spaces in the city. Then in the winter, and our visual studies students will also take this course called JV 101. In it, you will be designing all sorts of different things. And you actually start designing a piece of clothing made out of paper. So we're not just teaching you how to design buildings, but we're teaching you how to imagine all sorts of different things. Later, you'll do some filmmaking in the studio, filmmaking in the city, and then the design of a small pavilion. But why don't I hand it over to Gareth to talk about what first year visual studies students design or do?
Thanks, Peter. Well, we don't design. I mean, that's what's fascinating here, is that visual studies is basically a fancy term for contemporary art practice. So what you're doing in your first year, the studio course in first year is JAV 130. And I'm not sure if Peter or Gwen mentioned, but JAV stands for Joint Architecture Visual Studies. So you're doing both these things together in the same breath. But in the JAV 130 course called Visual Strategies, it's basically that. It's learning a bunch of art strategies. How we make in an art context, how we think in regards to artistic practice, but also how to read art that one makes, but also ones that your peers make. And we do that through a variety of mediums. So you're doing everything from drawing and painting and collage, both traditional collage, digital collage if you want, but also artists' moving image. So like Peter mentioned, there's video or filmmaking. We like to call it artist moving image because it sounds fancy. But you're thinking through these various strategies of art making. And just like the architecturally themed courses, you're doing this with architecture students, with visual studies students, but it's this way of rounding out your way of thinking so that even if you are studying architectural studies and that's your desired path, this way of thinking will only help you. Because the way that architects and artists think are similar, not the same. And so it's a way of giving you tools to think about the world visually, about how things that are made are encountered, and how to have a kind of legibility when it comes to the things you make, but also the things that others make, and how to read those things. And so you're doing this in a hands-on way. You're making work, and you're discussing those things that you are making.
Thank you, Bo. So some of the questions we have for our current students, and maybe if you can think back a little bit to when you were thinking about going to university and considering what you wanted to study. Why did you decide to study in the program that you were in? Kind of what inspired you or kind of caught your interest as to where you started from and kind of, I guess, how you are here now in fourth year. And I'll start with Prasham.
Yes, for sure. I would say kind of for both the reasons that Peter and Gareth mentioned, I really wanted to pursue an education where I was given the flexibility and the opportunity to look into both architecture and visual studies kind of courses and explore both of those parts of my interests. And so the Daniels undergrad program really provided that flexibility for me to kind of choose my own path and explore different options and different art styles and different architectural styles. And I thought that was a really important and Yeah, that was really important for me when I was picking my degree.
Thank you. And how about you, Olivia?
So my answer is a little different. I actually didn't start in architecture. I started in physics here at U of T, and then I decided quite quickly that I was more interested in architecture, so I switched. Um, but yeah, I think I really also wanted an art like a education that gave me flexibility and also allowed me to study these kind of interactions in space that I was interested in with physics initially, but just in a more, I guess, like at the scale of like the human rather than I don't know, like the atom or yeah, any physicsy thing. So I think that's kind of why. And it's definitely like been more than amazing. It's yeah, it's been an amazing education. So very happy.
Thank you, Olivia. And you bring up a good point that yes, sometimes students do change their mind and change their program, and you do have the flexibility to do that. And how about you, Maru?
So when I was applying for university, I always knew that I wanted to become a designer of some sort, but I was not entirely sure if I wanted to become an architect exactly. But I think what was really important for me about the Daniels program was that they kind of encourage you and all of the faculty as well to think about the ways you can use your architecture degree in other ways as well. And there is this flexibility. So because of, as Prasham also mentioned, I also am doing visual studies, that kind of gave me the option of trying different things. And right now, I feel very much more confident for my next step because I know I can use my past experience in whatever shape or form that I want within the design industry.
Thank you. So we have a question from one of our audience members about whether or not there is a lot of overlap between Daniel's courses and arts and science and art history courses. I'm going to think that might be directed to you, Gareth, but feel free, Peter, if there's anything you want to add after that, that would be great.
There's as much overlap as you want there to be, really. I mean, one of the things that's great about our programs is that you really, in first year there's space for electives, but after that, it really becomes a bespoke schedule for yourself. So you get to take the electives that you want from arts and science. That includes art history, but it can include English literature, Near Middle Eastern studies, women and gender studies, criminology, whatever you want. But the thing that I think is really important about the way that our pedagogy works and the way that we think about things is that when you take these courses in other parts of the university, we don't want you to just sort of take them and then forget about them. We want you to bring the things that you're learning in other departments into the work you're doing in Daniels. So in your visual studies studio work, in your architecture studio work. And I think one of the things that I always like to highlight is it would be such a waste to not bring that stuff to your work because all of the fields that we're in, architecture, design, art, they are always borrowing ideas and research from other fields. That's how these fields work these days. And I want every student to take advantage of the fact that you're at the top research institution in the country and one of the top in the world. So that when you are studying, what did I say, women and gender studies, Near Middle Eastern studies, when you're studying with those other professors, they're some of the best researchers in the world in those fields. And so the stuff that you glean from them is invaluable. So bring that to your other work. And so in visual studies, we encourage students to take a minor or two minors or another major in other programs in arts and science or an architecture one. And so we have students who are doing all sorts of things, and it makes the work that's produced in visual studies studios absolutely different from student to student. So it's not only that there is built-in flexibility, but it's so integral to how we function as a faculty. So if you're thinking about taking things like art history, obviously that is going to be a boon for your art thinking. But if you're also thinking about taking physics, like Olivia had, like that is something you can still bring into your work. And it's always going to make this amazing sort of, it pronounces itself in your work. So please find those overlaps as much as you can.
Everything Gareth said is spot on. We really want to avoid forcing every single student into the same mold or the same path. And we are immensely proud at Daniels, and the real strength is that there will be students with a passion for urbanism. They may want to end up in a master's of urban planning program. They're taking perhaps a minor or many courses in geography from the School of Cities. There are others who may really want to go into business, and so they're taking commerce courses. We have students preparing to apply for medical school for the next degree. But the really wonderful thing is, when you're just showing up to university, already it's hard to choose which offer to accept or which program. But sometimes it feels like you're kind of committing for the rest of your life to physics or to art or to business. And instead, what U of T and what Daniels are offering you is to accompany you and to provide you the opportunities to learn, to experiment, to test different kinds of knowledge, to pick up all sorts of different skills. We have tons of people who take what they learn about computer software and architecture, and then they go work in the tech industry, for instance. And we have other people who are coming from computer science courses, and they want to apply that in visual studies. I think probably the most important point we can get across today is our real belief in harnessing the whole university to give you an amazing experience and just to give you tons of great skills.
Thank you, Bo. So we have another question from our audience is about how to decide how many courses to take and which electives to take each term. I will pose this to our students, but I also just want to say that there are a lot of required courses that students will be automatically enrolled into. And then perhaps the students can speak to how they decided maybe their elective courses and how maybe they'd explored that a little bit. So maybe Prasham, if you want to talk a little bit about that experience from a student perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So in my case, I think going from high school to university, the transition within first year, I really wanted to focus on my main kind of architectural studies courses. And so I only decided on taking 4 courses in each semester and then kind of working with the comfortability with that workload and then kind of moving forward with taking 5 courses. I think a really good kind of way to pick an elective would be to like look at your own interests and see what you're interested in, like finding out more about, or maybe pursuing a minor. Perhaps I think maybe having an interest in a minor would also help with deciding what those electives are. But I think it's really helpful to take courses that you think are fun and are interesting, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Because if you're interested in what you are studying, you will enjoy it and
Yes.
probably do well
Hmm.
in those courses as
Hmm.
well. I will also say that academic orientation can help support students in making these decisions.
Hmm.
We also do have a team of academic advisors who are available to help students as well. And so if you are unsure at any time, we do have people who know exactly how to help you. And I would encourage you to make use of that as well. Olivia, I think I'll ask you this next question because I think it relates a little bit to your experience, having been in a different program as well as this one. So, in the program that you are in now, how much of your learning would you say comes from projects or making things, as opposed to like maybe theory and book reading type of work?
Oh my gosh, this is a very hard question because I feel like for me it kind of fluctuates between the different courses. I know right now in my thesis it's almost split down the middle between how much reading I'm doing and how much making. It's like contributing to like what I'm learning. And it's yes, it's pretty equal, but I would say like in past studio courses, it's been more so making that has been kind of the primary source of the learning there. Whereas I guess in like the history courses, it's mostly reading. Um, so yeah, I would say it kind of differs between the studios and the non-studio courses, but definitely in like your fourth year when you get to the kind of like upper year studios or like thesis or capstone, it's more integrated, I would say. I don't know. I think that's kind of how I would classify it for me. Um, Again, even within the class, like it fluctuates. Like in the fall, I was doing a lot of like reading, and now I'm doing more so making. But they kind of go hand in hand, I think.
Absolutely. I think you answered that question exactly. Maru, I'll ask you this next question. And so the question that we received was, how do students receive critiques or feedback on their design work? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so at least for the studios, we get desk crits, which is basically meeting with our instructors, and also sometimes we have this group review sessions basically. So we do this as a group within the classes. Because the size of the classes are quite small within the studio courses, you really get to talk with your prof and also with other students. So when I remember in my studio courses, I would exactly know what everyone else was doing, and that really helped because I could give them feedback as well. And then in terms of the final, basically critique session is that you just present to a group of guests, and they would also give you feedback, which I think is a very important process within the architecture courses, because even after you're done with your final, you want to keep on working on your project. So you really do get enough feedback, and it's really helpful in making your project better and better.
Thank you so much. So my next question will be actually to both Peter and Gareth, and it's along the lines of, I'll do my best to summarize the question, but in terms of the lab spaces that students have access to, do students have access to these lab spaces in their first year, or if not, when would they have access to start building and creating and doing that hands-on work? And would professors ask them to do that in their first year? So Peter, maybe I'll start with you, and then
Sure.
Gareth, if you want to talk about specifically the lab spaces that visual studies students might use.
Absolutely. So we could take the word lab and think of it in a couple of ways. There's a dedicated studio space for our undergraduate students here at Daniels. And if you have the chance to visit, it's one of the places we'll take you. You're all admitted to Daniels. You're welcome to come here and see them, and we'd love to show it to you. Students will have their studio classes in that space, and also can do a lot of work on their projects, making models, etc. There's a really great communal environment. I also know that some of the residences, for instance, Oak House actually has this amazing kind of lounge space that the architecture students who live at Oak House actually use almost as their own design studio. We also have a workshop and a fabrication lab with laser cutters and other fabrication tools. Those, it tends to be more in the second year that we introduce them, and then depending upon the courses you're taking in the third and fourth year, we have this amazing robot arm, and like not everyone gets to use it every single day, but students do great things with it. Gareth will talk to you about the visual studies spaces, but I'm going to talk to you about one of them because it's hidden in the Borden building, but we have a dark room for chemical photography, and it's just amazing. And so we got like architecture professors and students also learning how to print photographs, and it's just incredible. But anyway, I'll let Gareth tell you about all the things.
It's a secret no more. We have a dark room. If you tell everybody, Peter, you won't have time to get in there yourself. Yeah, I mean, in first year, like I said, there's that JAV 130 course you will be making. You got to make. That's part of why we're here. We can all talk around design. We can talk around art. We can talk around architecture, but we also have to make stuff because making is a form of thinking. Making is a kind of research. And it's really important to get into that right away. In visual studies, we do have a bunch of shared studio spaces. They're kind of divided up for certain kinds of practice, like there's the drawing and painting studio, but you can do whatever you want in there. There's the major big studio in North Borden that like has this, the most that looks almost like a gallery, but then it has this like extension at the back that kind of looks like a weird dungeon that is great for doing weird installation and sculptural work. Peter needs to visit. And the thing that is amazing is, yes, we use these for classes, but you have access to these spaces outside of class time. There's 24-hour access. You can go and work all night there. I mean, working all night in the dungeon might sound weird, but I know people who do it, and interesting things have been produced there. And so you have access. And we even do things like this one main space in North Borden. We try to make sure that there's never classes in there on Fridays. So that means that Fridays is as time for all students to go and work together if they want. Use this space. There's a free cycling, so there's materials, there's a handful of tools, and you can go and you can make stuff together. And you can form a sense of cohort and a sense of community by working in there all day Friday, on the weekends, in the evenings. I mean, obviously clean up after yourself because there will be classes in there and people might be installing work for critique. But the studio spaces are there for you to use. And we want to see students using them. That's what we're here for. The studio, as Peter said, is a kind of laboratory. It's a kind of place to test your ideas and test your thinking through making. So yeah, you should be making in your first year. I would really hope you find a way to be making and make stuff for yourself. Make stuff that's not for class. Make stuff because you like making. Just come to the studio and work. It's great.
One final thing about that. We put so much emphasis, and Gareth and I have just been explaining how great our buildings are and everything that's available here. You will also see when you study at Daniels, students getting off. We have a streetcar stop that I can actually see just out my window. You'll also see students getting off the streetcar. They may live in different parts of Toronto or the greater Toronto area. And you might see them carrying a cardboard box with a model that they've made at home. In other words, they're different people, they're working in different ways. We're challenging all of you to make things. We think it's amazing when you spend time doing things at school together next to your classmates. But we also have students working in all kinds of different ways and bringing their ideas and the things they make to share at Daniels.
Thank you, Peter. That was perfect for my next question, which is for all of our students, actually. The question that we received was, how do you manage your workload? So we've talked a little about the classes, we've talked about the making, we've talked about creating. And so how do you manage that along with maybe the rest of your life? And if you've, maybe experienced some challenges along the way, maybe how you've kind of worked that out. And I know it's different for everybody. And so feel free to share your own kind of unique tips and ideas and suggestions. And I'll start with Maru for that question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously it's a challenge. It's more challenging when you're in your first year and you tend to learn more and get more skilled as you go on. But personally, architecture is a very demanding, obviously, program. But at the same time, I had the chance to be a part of very different student clubs, be a part of very different student organizations. I did a whole lot of different electives and things on the side. And I found that the workload at Daniels and also, at U of T in general, it is manageable if you manage your time very wisely, but also I think the instructors are very helpful in telling you where to keep on going and working on your project and where to kind of draw the line and go to the next step and kind of start finalizing your project. So I think you get the resources that you need at U of T, and then you also learn the skills basically. And right now, my fourth year, I am really happy with the way that I kind of manage my workload. And I think, I've come a long way, but I got the help that I needed, and it happened ultimately.
Thank you. And thank you for pointing out that there is a lot of help and support available for students as well. Olivia, how about you? How have you kind of managed your workload?
I think the biggest tip that I have is just to start everything early. I know in architecture school, there's the idea of the all-nighter, but you don't have to do that if you start really, really early. And I also feel, with me, I'm a terrible multitasker, so I can't do multiple projects at once. I have to just start one and then work on it till it's done. So that really only works if you start your projects very early, as soon as you get them. And that's a very, very helpful thing beyond architecture as well, just starting your projects as early as you can, especially in architecture with how demanding it is and how iterative it is. It's very, very useful or just beneficial to start early. But that's my tip for that. But
Thank you, Olivia. And how about you, Prashant?
So contrary to Olivia, I'm notorious for pulling all-nighters. But I think for me, it's more about the time, working late at night, the studio's empty, it's quiet. I'm really able to focus in on my work and just kind of go pretty fast with making decisions and committing to ideas. Because when you start a design project, for example, there's an entire world of things that you could do out there. But I think really sticking to one thing has helped me, I think, manage my workload and being like, okay, I've committed, I'm marrying this idea, and that is what I'm going to pull forward. Um, but also, I think, same as Maru, I think doing stuff outside of school and knowing that I have commitments outside of school has really helped me kind of sit down and get my assignments done and like um has also left time for me to enjoy outside of school and kind of spend time with my friends or also like even doing study nights with my friends where we'll all just sit on our couch on our laptops and we'll like work and we'll have occasional conversations, but it's a nice way to spend time with the people that you care about and also get your work done. And so I think those kind of couple of things have helped me, but it's all trial and error, I would say.
Thank you. So there's lots of questions coming in, so let me try to get through as many of them as we can. Gareth, I think this question might be for you. Are there any printmaking materials in studio spaces?
This is a complicated question,
Okay.
and it might disappoint you to hear that we actually last year got rid of a lot of our printmaking equipment. We do have some silk screening screens. We do have some stuff, but we got rid of the main, like the lithos and things like that, because it's such a specialized bit of equipment that needs specialized knowledge to maintain. And we, as a faculty, have amazing relationships with places like Open Studio. So Open Studio is an organization, an artist-run organization that's just down the street. And they are sort of champions of all things printmaking. And so we'll often take students there, and we'll also do workshops there. We'll take classes there. So we don't have much right now in terms of printmaking stuff, but we do encourage people to do printmaking. And we have a course called Contemporary Printing. So you're still doing some traditional printing, but we're also thinking about the evolution of printmaking. So looking at things like risograph printing, things like 3D printing as a form of a printing technology that you can use to make art, not just for architectural model making, but using it to make objects. So we do have some, but not as much as we once did. But that doesn't mean we don't encourage traditional print and contemporary printmaking as a medium of viability within the visual studies studio practice.
Thank you, Gareth. Peter, is it possible for students in architectural studies program to also take elective courses in photography?
Oh, absolutely. So the visual studies program offers both chemical, in other words, with kind of analog photographs that you print in a darkroom, and digital or kind of computer-based photography. The courses are taught by several people, including Morris Lum, who's this amazing award-winning artist in Toronto. And this can be an elective that you've done, but as an architectural studies student, it could also be part of a minor in visual studies. And I believe Maru and Pasham said they were doing visual studies minors. So absolutely. Also, we have photography at different moments in our architectural studies program. And both Prasham and Olivia have been on summer courses in Berlin, Germany with me, where some of the assignments have included photography and filmmaking with local photographers and filmmakers in Berlin. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Peter. This question is about the number of students in our programs, architectural studies and visual studies. Peter, would you want to tell us how many students are in architectural studies?
Sure. So it, as with any program, can vary a bit. Usually we have a cohort or kind of a year, like the first year students, there might be around 200 or 225 or so. And for some people that sounds really small, and for some people that sounds really big. I think it's just right. And I think it's great because it means everyone in that bigger group, there'll be a bunch of people who are really interested in computers and robotics. There'll be a bunch of people who are really interested in maybe art history and philosophy. There'll be people who are more into, say, drawing and making, and other people more into computation. So I think it's big enough that there can be a lot of people who share your interests, but also small enough that, for instance, we can all be gathered in this series of kind of 2 or 3 buildings. So about 225 or so.
And Gareth, how about in the visual studies program? How many students are there?
This is a more complicated question than you'd think. We let in first year somewhere between 40 and 60 a year. And then overall for the program, we'd have, I'd say, maybe 400 if you count all the specialists, all of the majors, and all of the minors, which includes tons of architecture students like Maru and Prashant doing minors in Viz. Through arts and science, we also have another visual studies minor. So that's another way of getting students in. So it's a small program that actually trickles out to be a little bit bigger than it seems at any point, but your classes are always tiny, like maximum 25. So it will always feel small. You have a really good sense of a cohort. So you'll know the people in first year and second year and third year and fourth year throughout. So it's very intimate, which is fantastic. That's what you want in any kind of art program.
Thank you. So this question will be for our students, and it's kind of a big question because the question is about if you are involved in any sort of community engagement or outreach or clubs or active on campus, are architectural studies students involved in those? And so I know there's a lot of things to get involved in for students. And so maybe if you want to talk a little bit about your experience as to what that might have been like, I'll ask Maru first.
Yes, sure. This is one thing that I'm really like. I really enjoyed to be a part of at U of T, and I think there are like tons of clubs that you can join. Daniels has its own clubs, and we have the union, basically the Architecture and Visual Studies Student Union, which represents all the undergrad students, and then there are other clubs within Daniels that do different things. One of them like works on research. Some of them are focused on other initiatives. And within the U of T in general, there are very like so many different clubs that some of them are again focused on research. There are like music clubs, things like that. So you really do get, as a Daniel student, you really do get the chance to get involved with the architecture and visual studies clubs, but also every other club within U of T. And there's like so many options to choose from.
Thank you. And how about you, Olivia?
Yeah, so I'm a part of our student run research publication, Scaffold Journal. So we are an annual journal that publishes student research work both in undergraduate and master's. And also we connect with other architecture faculties from like across Canada, but also like globally. Like we have people contributing work from the States and also from Europe as well. And it's really cool to be able to kind of like connect with students and professors and working architects from all across the world and also within the school to kind of like create those, I guess, conversations in, I guess, student architectural research. It's a really fun thing to be a part of, just because of the conversations that we have and just being able to see everyone's work. But yeah, so that's kind of where I contribute to like, I guess, community outreach in a way, or like, yeah. So yeah, it's a really amazing publication. Volume 3 is coming out at the end of this school term, so it's exciting.
Thank you, Olivia. And how about you, Prashant?
I would say one of my most memorable clubs that I've been a part of is it's called VAPS, the Victoria Environmental Fashion Show. And I was a part of the set design team for that, as well as a model. And so it's a fully sustainable kind of fashion show that gets put on. And it really allowed me to take kind of everything that I was learning in studio and in my courses and really apply that in a very meaningful and like maybe a real life project. And that was, I think, an opportunity that um, I was very kind of happy to have and was very proud of, kind of putting on a real show and designing a real kind of set that actually gets built and people actually use. And I think that experience has kind of been invaluable to me. Um, but also the people that I meet. And it was kind of a way to explore a more creative side of myself. And I think that it really, yeah, it's amazing to get involved.
Thank you. So I guess to summarize that question, is all our students get involved in completely different things that are of interest to them alongside their studies as well. So I have a two-parter question for our students. So a lot of your courses are required courses. You do have some elective courses. There's going to be courses that you love, and there's going to be courses that you don't love as much. And so my two-part question is, what's a course that you really loved and what's something you really liked about it? What made you really kind of intrigued or interested in it? But the flip side of it is, was there any courses that you didn't enjoy so much? And kind of how did you get through that? How did you kind of push through the course you didn't love? I'll start with Maru.
Yeah, so my favorite course was a study abroad course that I took in my second year. It was with Professor Babasikas, and we went to Athens, and we spent like 3 weeks there, basically studying the city, but also working on a project as a team. And I think that was the highlight of my undergraduate program. Basically, I think it really changed my perspective on architecture and the world in general. Um, so I really enjoyed that, and I think if anyone has the chance to do something like that, or Daniels offers so many different courses like that. We have like design build, all of those type of courses. I think those are very enjoyable. In terms of courses that I didn't enjoy as much, maybe so there's obviously a range. One thing that I would say is that after you get to experience different types of like history, design, and technology courses, and then after your second year, so basically starting from third year, you can choose to specialize in which stream you want. And I think that helped because in my first 2 years, I realized that, for example, I was not that interested in like some of the technology courses. And from that onwards, I could just focus on design, which I love so much. But yeah.
Thank you, Maru. What about you, Olivia?
So I think a course that I really, really loved, um, shout out Professor Seeley, was ARC 251, which is a second year history theory course that we all have to take. And I think it really, really made me realize how much I loved and was interested in history and theory and architecture. The lectures were really focused on very different topics within architectural history theory, from like Baroque architecture to like the idea of perspective, and how architecture is like represented through photography and film. And it was really, really amazing. And the projects for that were also really, I think, fundamental in how I kind of understand architecture today. In terms of a course that I didn't love as much, I think my answer is similar to Maru's in a way that because first and second year are more so general than say third and fourth, there are some courses that you take that you might not like as much. I would say some of the urbanism courses, there's one in second year that I didn't love as much, but that's just because my interests don't lie in urbanism. They're more specific to like architectural design and history theory. So yeah, I would say that, but
Thank you. What about you, Prasham?
I would say one of my favorite courses, I think similarly to Maru, the Studio Abroad with Peter Seeley in Berlin has been, I think, the highlight of my kind of my degree. But a course that I really liked at the Daniels faculty is also ARC 302. It's a lecture-based course where a lot of different practitioners from around the world are invited and they kind of come and talk to us. And I think it was really valuable to hear and to actually be able to ask questions to real life practitioners and architects and designers and urbanists and landscape architects and kind of learn from their experiences and have one-on-one conversations. I think that experience has been very memorable for me. And in terms of maybe a few courses that I didn't like or wasn't kind of up my alley were some of the more landscape architecture courses where it was very like theory based or very like essay heavy. Writing essays is not my strong suit, and so I really kind of struggled with that. But in terms of kind of how do I move past, how do I kind of get past that was there was a lot of help with like writing essays. The Writing Center at Daniels has a lot of help. There's people that you can talk to. I think also like emailing professors and reaching out if you're struggling. I think that really kind of helped my ship sail. Um, and and I kind of came out with those out of those courses with a much more of a positive attitude than when I was kind of starting them.
It was great feedback. Absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
I was just gonna say, I think it's great that what you're hearing are the different students actually having different answers to what they really liked And that's the whole point of our program. For some people will be in architectural studies and they'll realize it's actually the visual studies courses that are their greatest passion. Others, it'll be the computer ones. But it's really great to try one or two landscape courses to learn from them. But it's baked right into it that some people will be their passion and some people will then move on to other things. And that's really great.
Absolutely. So we have a question that has come in about transitioning from high school into university, which can be definitely a challenge for students to adjust. And I think, Prasham, you kind of highlighted that a little bit in the course that wasn't to your strength, which was essay writing, and how you might transition from high school. So, Prasham, did you want to take that question in terms of like how you might adjust and how you might push through some of the challenges?
Yeah, for sure. I think what really helped me, in the beginning, everything is so intimidating. When you're in a new environment with new professors, it's very extremely intimidating. But I think knowing that there is support and reaching out, like actually reaching out, even if it's to your peers or to your TAs or to your professors, I know it can be really hard, but just reach out. There's people that care and there's people that are always there to support you through kind of whatever it is that you're experiencing. But I would also say like kind of familiarizing yourself with Daniels or with the university, like going out and exploring different parts of the building. It adds to like getting comfortable with using the facilities. And like it was, talking to people. I know in my first year I was very reserved and I was like, I'm just gonna go in and out. But I think lingering within the Daniels faculty when in our commons, getting a coffee at our cafe, and it kind of is such an amazing like space and such an amazing kind of area where you can really interact with people and get to know more people. And just the transition from high school, I think I would also say in terms of um, knowledge, like learning as much as you can or digging deep into your interests. I think I wish that I had learned some more of the software requirements. I think maybe even just looking at a couple YouTube videos so that you're not kind of thrown into the deep end or you don't feel like you're thrown into the deep end with like studio courses, for example. But yeah.
Thank you so much. So we are getting close to the end of our time together, but we do have a question about what students might do when they graduate. And so I know this is probably a little bit different for visual studies and for architectural studies. So I'll ask our professors to weigh in a little bit on, whether or not Daniels is able to support students in when they get to graduation, maybe what some of our students are interested in, whether it's going on into grad school or directly into the job market. So maybe I'll start with you, Peter, and then Gareth, if you want to add a little bit more as well.
So, very great and very important question. A lot of our students decide to continue to a professional master's in architecture degree. For some of them, that might be actually here at the Daniels faculty. And for others, it will be at architecture schools around the world. We are extremely proud of the success of our students at basically creating wonderful opportunities for themselves around the world. Other students might head into something a bit related, like a Master of Landscape Architecture, a Master of Urban Planning degree, for instance. So it's kind of one big group of people who are continuing in architecture and design. Then there are lots of other people who might take their skills into something a bit related, but a bit different. So maybe into the tech industry, could be into real estate, could be into municipal government, could be into further studies in art history, for instance, or into the publishing industry. And we are equally proud of these people. It's amazing. Our students may head off to law school or medical school or may go into business. I actually had a student at the Olympics this year in bobsled, and I mean, is that a specifically architectural skill? Well, kind of. But in other words, the students are heading in all kinds of directions, but a lot of them, it's to a professional degree in architecture or something similar.
Yeah, I can add in on that. I think much of what Peter says is, extremely similar for visual studies students. One of the things that we like to think about here is that in all of Daniels, much of what we're doing is already experiential learning. Like we are learning by doing, and we are working with professionals in the field. It's not always from an academic remove. And in that respect, we are setting people up to go out into the world, go out into doing further studies, master's degrees in whatever program, but also just going out and being active. So that could be entering straight into the workforce. And for arts, there's this like weird cliche. It's like, oh, you can't get a job in art. Well, lots of people do. And lots of people take the skills that they learn here and bring them to other fields. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but these days, every industry is looking for creative thinkers. It is a cliche, but it is what everybody is always looking for. And so like, I just ran into a former student about a week and a half ago who's doing wealth management. Like he is telling rich people how to invest their money, and he did visual studies, right? And he's using his creative thinking to help them out. So there is this weird myth that like art students can't get jobs, but guess what? They all do somehow. And there's also a lot of people who are actually just practicing as artists. That is a viable thing. I'm an example of that. I'm a viable exhibiting artist in many galleries and museums around the world. I went through the same program. So there's lots of ways that we set people up, and there's lots of paths they can take. But just like how you can craft your education here to be bespoke to your own interests, we set people up to take their own interests and have bespoke futures. So there's not this prescriptive sort of pathway that people take. They go all over the place. And so we have people who have gone into the film industry, into arts, into wealth management, into law, into I'm trying to think what else, like lots of academics. People have gone on to do masters and PhDs in art and related fields. But like you name it, and I can tell you visual studies students who have gone on to do it. So we, like Peter was saying, our students from visual studies have gone on to some of the most competitive and most respected graduate programs around the world. Some of the ones from institutions that you have definitely heard their names before. And so, we are setting them up in that regard.
Thank you. So we are at the end of our time together, and so I know that there are a lot of questions that our attendees have. And so if your question did not get answered today, please send it to futurestudents@daniels.utoronto.ca. We are always happy and willing to answer whatever questions that you might have. I do want to extend a special thank you to our students, Olivia, Maru, and Prasham. We really do appreciate you taking the time. We know you're busy. We know you have busy schedules. And so we appreciate you sharing your experiences, the good, the challenging, all of the above is we're very appreciative to hear those experiences. And thank you, of course, to our program directors as well for joining us and answering all these questions. And so we hope to see many of you in September here at Daniels. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.